Usually it's good to learn from our mistakes, but you know what's better? Learning from others' mistakes and not ruining our lives in the process. And so in this video, I'd like to talk to you about 5 money mistakes that most people make, some that I too am guilty of, so that you can avoid them. And yes, buying a house is one of them. Let's get into it. Let's start with not being aware of your expenses. This is how most people operate. Earn a fixed amount every month, spend money on rent and the expenses, and then save what's left over at the end of the month. This works well if your expenses are really low and you by default are predisposed to saving money. But most people don't operate this way. And the biggest issue that arises is that while your income is fixed, your expenses and savings are usually not. And that makes perfect sense too, because obviously each month differs from one another. There are our wants and needs, and sometimes there are unexpected expenses too. But not being aware of your expenses is a slippery slope that you should avoid. And you might think, let's create a budget and stick to that. And I'm sure you see a lot of people online talking about budgeting and planning for the month too. This I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, because budgets are all about looking backwards instead of the future, and we tend to get really specific and worry about things we shouldn't. And also the fact that you've got to track your money down to the T. I mean, where did these $5 go? And what about those $12? I mean, do I really need to worry about the fact that I spent $78.40 on Kit Kats last month?
Productivity is important, but how can I be productive if I have this one little thing in my brain that I cannot get out, and that one little thing is a soft pretzel?
Okay, although that might be its own problem, I personally don't think it makes any sense worrying about the small amounts and pinching pennies through a budget plan. But instead, what you can do is understand the trends with your expenses and add a buffer for each category so that you fall well within that by the end of the month. Like, if you know you normally spend about $400 to $500 a month on groceries, great, add a buffer of about $50 to $100 on top of that and account for it. But more importantly, if you see that there are some unforeseen expenses that popped up, then plan to mitigate them instead of when it's too late. And of course, like I keep saying in all of my videos, pay yourself as soon as you get paid. That is, put aside money or save upfront instead of saving with what's left over at the end of the month. Not building a credit history. You all already know the importance of maintaining a good credit history or credit score, but there are still a lot of people and immigrants here who just don't care about it enough. I even personally know people who work in the finance space who's done nothing to build a good credit history. And what ended up happening to this couple I know was that when they wanted to move, they had a super tough time finding a place because most, if not all, landlords ask for a credit report before giving you the place. And by then it was too late to do anything about it. So be it moving places, buying a car, taking a loan, buying a house, etc., basically leveraging debt, this credit report comes in handy. Does this mean you need to spend all your time worrying about your credit score? Hell no. What I'm instead recommending are doing things that are no-brainers that help you build a solid credit history without too much effort. Like using a postpaid cellular connection instead of a prepaid one, for instance, or having at least one credit card in your name, or ensuring that if you do have a loan or a debt, that it's tracked against your social security number or your SIN so that it's included in your credit tracking. I remember my wife too for the longest time didn't have a postpaid connection and she barely used her credit card. But since the moment she made the switch, her credit score has seen a considerable increase. There are different factors improving your credit score, but one of the biggest one being that you have these accounts or bills open for long enough. The longer the time you have these accounts active, the better your credit score. Also ensure that once you have these basic products in place, that you don't keep requesting for improving your credit limit or additional products, because that's a hard inquiry against your profile which will negatively impact your score. I can work on an in-depth video around building a strong credit score if you like. Hit the subscribe button and leave me a comment if you're interested. And another factor that could potentially ruin your credit score is the next mistake you need to avoid: not paying your bills on time. I forget things all the time. Lunch that I was supposed to take with me to work, forgotten. Cancel my Prime membership after the trial period, slipped my mind. My wife asked me to call her in the afternoon. Wife? What wife? I'm so screwed when she sees this. Anyway, for someone like me that forgets things so easily, paying bills on time was a challenge I faced when I started my first job back in India. And I realized that the only way to handle this and everything else I keep forgetting was to have a system that I can rely on. And so for this case, I have weekly, monthly, and even yearly reminders set up on my phone for making payments on time. And I can't stress on the importance of paying your bills on time. Missing one could really set you back, with you having to pay late payment fees. And no one likes that. Also, with the credit score piece I was talking about earlier, making payments on time is the biggest contributor to the score. Your credit score takes super long to build but can be completely destroyed in a matter of minutes. So don't default or delay your payments. Find a system that works for you and ensure you pay it off well before before time. That could mean setting up reminders like what I do, or even setting up auto payments of these bills within your bank account so that gets taken care of automatically. Let's next talk about real estate. Everyone's favorite mistake. I meant favorite topic.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
And in this case, buying a house because everyone is doing so. This one's going to be a controversial one, alright. If you've already bought a house or are super sure about buying one, I'm not here to be a party pooper and make you feel bad or anything. I'm just here to spit facts, yo. Mr. Facts in the house. No pun intended, because we're talking about buying houses. Get it?
Too many jokes.
Anyway, real estate can be a good investment for sure, but most people don't simply look at it that way because there's so many emotional factors with buying a house, especially if you're planning to live in it. Not to mention the societal pressures of buying a house, keeping up with the Joneses, the Kardashians, the Kumars, the American dream, etc. And how you're a failure if you rent instead of living in your own house. Having done some extensive research on this topic, I would say buying a house is not a good investment for most people. I repeat, it's not a good investment for most people until and unless you have the following sorted out first. You have super reliable source of income that has been appreciating over the last couple of years. You have a good chunk of savings or liquidity available at your disposal. You have a diversified investment portfolio, and you can easily afford to make the down payment for the property you have in mind and still have leftover liquidity. If you check all of the above boxes, then your decision is spot on and real estate is definitely worth considering. If not, which I assume is a lot of you watching here, including me, then I would recommend holding off because it's not a wise decision at all. There are numerous reasons for this. There's smarter investments you can make, better profits, more flexibility, lesser financial pressures, and so on. The fact that your other investments can be quickly withdrawn or liquidated, but you can't just up and about sell your house that you live in should be reason enough. Anyway, I'm not getting into details of this because I think this topic warrants its own dedicated video or even series of videos for that matter. And so if you'd like to see these videos, then leave me a comment down below. Long story short, real estate can be one of the biggest investments you make, and so you need to be really smart about your choice here. The choice really is this investment could grow and compound, which could fetch you more real estate investments in the process. Or you could simply end up with just one property that you pay through the rest of your life. Or worse, you even lose that. Since we're on the topic of houses anyway, let's next talk about living in the wrong city or location. While this might seem like a choice or a psychological thing, it has drastic financial repercussions too. Let me explain with an anecdote about one of my friends. She used to live in Mississauga, which is part of the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, about an hour away from downtown, where she had to come down to work. Not to mention most, if not all of her friends live in downtown, which meant that she spent quite a bit of time and money to regularly travel to and fro. Late nights meant that she would Uber back home, which isn't really economical either for that distance. There was even this incident where she met with an accident. Nothing serious, but she at that point felt that there was no one there around her where she lives that she could count on. Not to mention, she was sharing her apartment unit with another stranger with whom she had a falling out with. All in all, although she was saving money with paying lesser rent, she was spending her money, time and stress considerably in other places to live her life. And of course, psychologically, she was in a really bad space. And slowly things started spiraling and she started hating her job too. There's a chance that you might relate with some of these things that she's gone through. But before you start commenting, oh yeah, but I earn in dollars now. I save so much money not living in downtown. Do you know how expensive things are here in general?
It's no hassle. Even before you start. That was a preemptive shh. Just know I have a whole bag of shh with your name on it.
Okay, so I agree with all of that and I firsthand know how expensive things are here. I get it. But there's no denying that there's a huge trade-off of time, convenience and money too. You don't want to save money on rent and live far from the city and then end up buying a car, which you'll end up spending quite a bit more money on. So can't you just spend more money on rent and live in a better location and not buy a car in the first place? This whole thing is very nuanced, I get it. It all comes down to your situation. Maybe you want a bigger space, but at the core of it, if you spend a good chunk of your time traveling, getting to places or living alone in your apartment unit, then you'll either not have time to do other things that you want to do, or worse, feel miserable always. Now this friend of mine, she ended up moving to downtown. She had to pay extra to remove her name from the lease at her previous place, pay extra to move downtown and set things up at this new place. But now she's happy. And so it's well worth it in her eyes. And so I'll leave you with this thought. It's important for you to spend time and get really clear and specific about your expectations and then work super hard to make that happen. Usually people skip the first piece of getting clear with their expectations and simply move on to working really hard only to find disappointment at the end of the struggle. Don't make that mistake. If you learned anything from this video, then please support me by hitting the like button and subscribe more for such content. I should mention that this is part 2 of the financial mistakes series. Check out part 1 right here. And I'll see you on the next one, or probably this one. Maybe check this out.